ahead and get started. It's 1 minute past 10. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our permit streamlining task force subcommittee meeting. I'm Lucky Desopoulos, your host. I want to welcome you all. Perhaps we can go around with self-introductions. To my right,
Amir Dersbach, Assistant Deputy Executive Officer, Engineering and Permitting.
Matt Smith, Blair.
Bill Pierce, Towing.
Judy York, York Engineering.
Saad Karen, AQMD Information Management Division.
David Ono, Engineering and Permitting.
Paul Wright, Information Management Production.
Catherine Rodriguez, Senior Admin Secretary, EMP.
David Houck, I'm in the permit streamlining team.
Bhaskar Chandan, AQMD Permitting.
Carry on Orange County Sanitation District.
Sin Chen, AQMD Information Management.
Tammy Yamasaki, SCE.
You guys can join us at the table. We have plenty of seats. So, welcome all. A few introductory announcements. So we are going to ask you to place your cell phones on silent or vibrate mode. The restrooms are located right outside this door, around the corner to your right. In case, in the event of an emergency, we may need to shelter in place or evacuate the building. If an evacuation is called, we are going to exit the room through this door in the back. And if a shelter in place is necessary, such as in the event of an earthquake, we are going to drop down, cover our heads, and hold on to our chair. So with that, we are going to dive right into the one and only item that we have in the agenda, but very important item. We are very excited to unveil this online tool, which has been designed to provide you with a status report on the pending application. So it's a dashboard application, and we have been working on it for quite a few months, more than a year, as a matter of fact, with our partners in IM, and we have taken it through several rounds of internal testing and improvements, and we think we are very close to deployment. And we want to present what we have and get your feedback. And if everything goes well, I think we should, within the next few weeks, we may be able to release this publicly. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to David Ono, who's going to be giving us a demo. So we are going to show you a few still shots, as well as a few live shots from actual facilities, right? We have some of the actual demonstrations. So we'll see. All right, Dave, you're on.
Okay, thanks, Lucky. I'm going to go over the dashboard, but before we get into the actual tool, we'll go over a little bit of the background. So this was an initiative from our governing board, who asked us to look for ways to increase our transparency when it comes to our permit processing activities. And so what we would like to do is then incorporate that through integration with our buying tool that's currently available. It had a recent upgrade, so I think we at our last task force meeting gave an overview of the updates to Find. And this is another piece that's going to be integrated with Find to allow you to then access this, what we're calling our pending application status dashboard. So with respect to, what's the benefits associated with this dashboard, this direction from the board, so it meets our direction that was given to by the board, and it will increase transparency by giving a look into the process and looking at the status. Permit processing involves multiple steps, and what we're hoping to do is showcase how we meet individual milestones on the way towards getting a final permit issued. And this will give a sense to people wanting to know, whether or not the application is so-called stuck. If it's stuck, if it's waiting information from the facility, that maybe is our correspondence, and maybe you might have forgotten the exact details. This would show that there's something pending from the facility. And in some cases, it may be something that's interagency interaction. maybe the district is waiting for something from the CEC, or there's a CEQA document that needs to be reviewed. We put those in a pending agency action or pending AQMD action status. So it'll give you a sense of like how long, if it's being held up, what the reason is, and maybe how long it might take before that can be resolved. Internally, the benefits are that with this new mechanism, it could stave off, additional inquiries when the information is already been communicated but may have been forgotten. So you can look at the dashboard and say, oh yeah, there was something that we're waiting on a source test result or something. It's a reminder, a quick check into the dashboard. It can help communicate to our governing board members and also internal staff. There's some coordination also between staff members, engineering and other divisions, source system division, maybe sometimes a compliance. If there's a compliance issue that's holding up issuing a permit, these things can also be identified within this dashboard. So other benefits is that since we're gathering information that in many cases is already system driven, it can replace some of our current reporting that in some cases we have to do manually. We use spreadsheets to kind of pull metrics. And once we have the information updated and over a course of time, some tracking metrics, we hope to be able to improve our ability to allocate resources to make sure that each engineer has the proper workload. Sometimes you get a bunch of pending applications and they turn out to be simple, or in some cases the project is canceled. This way will help us to determine individual staff's workloads and redistribute work more efficiently.
If I can just expand on this, I think you've been working with us for several years now in this permit streamlining and backlog reduction effort. And you know that we have accomplished quite a bit. Our backlog is gone. Our inventories are more than 50% down. It's 54%, 55% in that neighborhood. We've been updating our policies, our procedures. We are making great strides. So this is one of the last remaining commitments from us to our board. And as you can tell, we are pretty excited about the capabilities and what this new tool is going to bring to the table, because it seeks to enhance accountability, transparency, not just relating information to the applicant or to an interested party. So, and as we do that, it propels us to continue doing our business better and maintaining those gains that we have already achieved. And hopefully, we'll go even beyond. So, we are extremely excited about this. So sorry, Dave.
It's fine. So what the dashboard primarily does is it introduces two new indicators. One is an elapsed time indicator. That's something that people can relate to. They know when they submitted their application. They know more or less how long it's been, but it will serve as a reminder internally how far along we are in the process. And in most cases for permits to construct, our goal is to turn that around within 180 days. So what we do is we put kind of red, green, yellow indicators telling us when we're getting closer to that deadline. That's a heads up that you're getting closer to that deadline, and maybe should reprioritize your work to ensure that you stay within the green area. The other concept or the other indicator is what we're calling application status indicator or intermediate status indicator. With respect to terminology, there are system-driven application status indicators, and we want to kind of differentiate that a little bit. These are indicators that a staff engineer would input themselves when things come up that may cause an application to, we'll say, get stuck because they can no longer work on it until they get additional information or until some other event occurs, like a source test result has been conducted or source test has been conducted. They cannot move forward until that test is finished. So that would be an indicator that you would say, okay, we're waiting for the facility to conduct the source test. And common things that might happen is you issue a permit to construct, you're waiting for that equipment or facility to actually be constructed before we can issue the permit to operate. So that's awaiting a facility action that's outside the engineer's control. So these are the things that we want to highlight and kind of give an indicator that, okay, the engineer is not actively working on that permit or that application right now for the reason that would be identified in the dashboard. If neither case is up, if there's not waiting any facility or engineering action, then we have this other icon which shows an individual working at their desk and actively processing. So it's in process. So The 3 states would be in process, or it's awaiting information or some action from the facility, or it's maybe awaiting from something interdepartment or interagency on our side. And in some cases, you may have something awaiting both facility action and an agency action, and then both of those would be highlighted. If neither one's highlighted, then the in-process icon would highlight. The other thing that we wanted to do is because some of our internal tracking statuses are like unique to the system, there may be some batch processing that occurs within the system, and we track everything in the system. Some of those aren't as meaningful, so the ones that are meaningful, as meaningful milestones, we have this horizontal application status bar to track process on key milestones, when we received it, when it's deemed complete, when a permit to construct is issued, and when permit to operate is issued. We also track like when it was assigned to an engineer. These are things that are meaningful to an applicant or someone from the outside, but we don't include all the system-driven ones on this horizontal status bar. But for those who like to look at all the details at the very bottom, we also have what we call a diary that shows all the indicators there. But we think by giving this kind of executive summary level with this horizontal status bar, it's something that, looking at it quickly, you can assess where you are in the process. On the time indicator, time elapsed indicator, we have a few different time frames that we're tracking. So the most common is going to be the 180-day turnaround for permits to construct. Once the permit to construct is issued, they could be up to another year, or in some cases extended before the permit to operate is issued. That's the timeline given with respect to how long we allow before we issue the permit to operate, because the permit to construct acts as a temporary permit to operate. And the first clock is the blue dial here. That's in the pre-screening mode, and that one, that's the time before we will deem it complete. Ordinarily, that's a 30-day clock, after which time it's automatically deemed complete, but in many cases, we need additional information. So that would go out and would stay blue, but we want to track the total elapsed time. So in this particular example, we say it's 9 days over 30 days, but the application is on hold because there was a request for additional information. It's pegged out, but it's still in the blue area. It's more or less kind of stopped. It's no longer accounted towards the 30 days because of the information request, but that's the additional clock there. There are some other clocks associated with Title V. There's various time frame milestones that are built into the rule. In general, we put that the green zone at like 75% elapsed, and then between 76 and 100% is in the yellow zone, and then if it goes over, we say that's red. For the 180-day clock, we want 150 days, that's in the green zone area. Over 180 days is, it's red, and then in between it's in the yellow. Going on to the application status indicators or intermediate status indicators. As I discussed earlier, if there aren't anything holding up the application, we consider it to be workable, and so we show the icon in process. You see what it looks like when it's active or highlighted. When it's not highlighted, it's grayed out, as you saw on the earlier screen. Again, if it's waiting facility action, we highlight this icon with basically a little building. And if it's waiting an agency action, primarily us, would be South Coast AQMD action that's awaiting. And again, to emphasize that if it's awaiting like a EPA review, we consider that part of the agency action. We don't have a different one for like EPA. It's all part of awaiting an agency action. Because from a facility's perspective, it's not them. It's awaiting something, so we'll highlight it on our icon. So with respect to the types of things that we've identified or as groups on things that can hold an application up, these are kind of the larger groupings that we came up with. It might be easier to read on your handout, but this is what Lockie's alluding to in terms of our excitement on being able to become more efficient. As we gather more data, as this system is rolled out and we start tracking reasons for why applications may be held up over time, we're going to identify some areas that need some trends where if a large majority of our applications are held up for specific reasons, that particular area we may want to focus on to make it more efficient. more so on the South Coast AQMD action side because we have more control over that. But on the facility action side, in some cases, if we notice that there's a significant amount of time that's spent on these particular items, maybe there's a way for us to facilitate that to make that not as big of a hurdle by facilitating information sessions or maybe outreach to ensure that those actions can be turned around quickly. On the district side, there are a lot of other things that can hold up a process, like the CEQA analysis or source tests or an EPA turnaround. Sometimes there are, we refer to them as policy decisions, and a lot of those have to do with legal interpretations that may come from incorporating state and federal requirements and then harmonizing with our requirements. And if we find trends in that area, of course, then we want to come up with the ways to streamline that through either guidance or legal interpretation. And that's why we're pretty excited about pulling this out, because we want to gather that data, what gets measured, gets managed. We want to be able to manage these things to become more efficient. So this is one of the screenshots. It's basically a scrolling web page, but in essence, there's an upper part and a lower part. When you look at it, the upper part has really the quick hit items to indicate where the status is of that particular application. So we put the two status indicators on the right-hand side for easy reference. You'll see the time elapsed here, and then whether or not it's awaiting an action from the facility or an action from the district or other agency, and then maybe whether or not it's in process. We have generic information that identifies the application. This is mostly the same stuff that's in the current version of FINE when you look for a facility on their equipment list. But we added a couple additional pieces there, most predominantly the indicators, but things like starting construction date and engineering contact, that information is in there. It's so that people who are familiar with FINE, they'll see it and they see additional information. They shouldn't lose any information that they were currently getting. The bottom half of the dashboard is where there's kind of a lot more detail. If someone is more interested to see the history of how we got to the status that they're currently at, we put the horizontal milestone tracking in this section. And then, as I mentioned, there's an extensive diary that identifies all the actions that occurred historically with this application, some of which are system-driven drivers, and but also includes where we may have added an intermediate status indicator and key milestones here. So you see in this particular case, there's a source test that we're waiting to be conducted and a target date for that action. But you also see the permit to construct was issued, and it matches up with the permit to construct date here, as well as on the upper part. So there's a little redundancy in some cases, but it serves to highlight those areas that we feel that the facility is most, or the applicant is most interested in.
So,
Okay.
just a quick question on that screen. So will that also include like Title 5 facilities? So that's maybe, so the dates will be there, like it'll show when it was submitted to EPA, and you'll get that type of detail?
Yes.
So with that background, first I'll ask if there's any questions before I go into the actual dashboard.
I have a question. So with the Title V new application, starts to be available here too?
Yeah, all the pending applications will be available through the FINE and through the dashboard.
Okay, so what about like when we have the PC to appeal waiting period, I mean, for multi-year projects? I mean, it's difficult for us to, have an extended like
Yes.
4 times.
All those will be reflected. The automatic assumption would be, that we complete it in 12 months, but you'll be submitting extension requests,
Right.
and it will be extended, and everything will be reflected there. So when you look at the diary, there'll be, all those extensions and the approvals, they're all going to be reflected there.
But in terms of the dial's going to be in the red, right?
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
which is, I guess, okay, so long as there's an explanation,
Right.
okay?
Mhm.
And right now, the way we are displaying our pending inventory backlog is we're showing it on red, in this one bar chart that we had in that column, it's going to be on the red zone. But this tool will allow us actually to refine the tool and perhaps establish different bins, for things that are on hold because, they're under construction or for whatever reason. So we may be able to refine the tools and establish multiple bars, that can be legitimately populated, reflective of what the applicant is submitting. Right now, we don't have that, that luxury. But this tool may be able to give us that luxury.
Okay, what about like, applications that are expedited requests? Would it show which application's been, well, it's expedited request?
They're on the XBP mode.
Yeah, I don't think we've recorded that part.
Because, we do typically request expedited, but I have to tell, are we really getting the funding faster?
Okay.
It's,
It's a different question. It's a good question. So it's not going to be reflected there. If you are interested on that kind of information, actually we developed some stats, and we can have a separate meeting and we can share with you, what you are getting for your money. In
Right.
most instances, yes, you are ahead of the curve. In some instances, even ourselves, we are questioning, is there any benefit, to go
right,
extra
yeah.
fees here?
Sometimes things get followed down, during maybe the permit negotiation process.
Yeah. I mean, our view, and I don't want to sidetrack over here, or digress. Typically, with the lower category, A, B, C, D type of permits, you are getting some accelerated service. With the more complicated permits, the refinery types, the distinction is not all that great. Even though most of the refiners, will submit an XPP, they'll have an XPP request. It's debatable whether, there's much benefit to doing that, but if you're on the lower categories, permit application categories, you are definitely getting some benefit. But like I said, don't take my word for it. Maybe we can have a separate meeting, and we can share with you, all those stats.
On that note, one of the things I always wonder about is when we're going through the permit application or I get the permit to construct, I never know if I'm gonna get another invoice for more. I have to pay more, or like how we've gone over the hours and I'm gonna get another check, or did we stay under and I'm gonna get checked back, or I never, there's nothing in here that's gonna tell me that, so I would like to, it would be nice to see that.
Yeah, okay. I
For like
think in its
budgeting and-
current version, you don't, actually, you're not the only one that is requesting that. We got similar requests from others as well.
Okay.
So this version probably won't have it, but we are all cognizant, on our side, it's our first generation, They're probably gonna be second, third generation, depending on the feedback that we are gonna get from you guys. So we wouldn't mind, enhancing it, and providing, some enhancement along the lines that you have described.
But meanwhile, if you have any concerns,
Yeah.
ask the permitting engineer, because the permitting engineer knows exactly how much they have
Right,
put in the system to
Okay.
charge. So
alright.
But it's gonna be very ad hoc, so I think the general comment that we receive, okay, we get an invoice, it says X dollars,
And that's it.
but there's nothing, right? Okay, got it.
Yeah, I wanted to maybe add a little bit to that. Sounds like you want to know, tracking maybe time and materials as it's going on. This dashboard is outward facing, so anybody who goes through Find will be able to pull that up. So keeping that in mind, I think in terms of, do you necessarily want full transparency on something particular to your application that?
I don't think it has to be on the dashboard, definitely on the invoice.
I think it's the invoice
Yeah.
request, we got it, yeah.
But if there's an open invoice for that permit after it was been given,
Sure.
you're still waiting on that too.
Yeah.
Could say, if there's additional funds, that's all that's all you check, not how much or
Okay.
maybe. So then I could just look at it and go, oh, I'm gonna see additional funds coming. I don't need to know exactly how much, but at least I know it's coming.
I have another question. I'm kind of trying to get a feel for how the source testing kind of fits in.
Yes.
With the process.
Sure.
So, if the PC requires, initial source testing, you don't issue PO until the source testing?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I know the whole process of getting the protocol approved, getting the test conducted, that could take,
It's gonna be reflected there,
uh-huh.
whatever that is, as many months as there is, it's gonna be reflected there from the time you are required to submit the source test, by the time we receive it, how long it takes for us to review the protocol first, and then how long it takes for us to review the source test protocol. Everything's gonna be reflected there. So the detailed diary that Dave was talking about, it's gonna spell everything out. And if we are waiting for you to submit to do the source test and submit the source test report, then it's the facility icon that it's gonna be on. If we have received the source test report and we're in the process of reviewing it, it's gonna be on us. It's gonna be the AQMD icon that it's gonna be on.
I've got a question. Carol's comment here on the source testing, because that raises some unknowns, I guess, for me. When, a few years ago, when we had the backlog on permits, I remember we had 7,348.
Hey, very good, Bill.
remember
That's has been duly noted. Bill knows our starting point. Okay.
That's the starting point. Okay, and then you miraculously got rid of all that to a sustainable level, according to you and Wayne. And you process about 7,000 permit applications a year is what I'm hearing.
More than, actually close to, between 8,000 and 9,000.
Oh, now, okay.
Yeah.
So at one time, I think it was about 7, but anyway.
It was, but we beefed up our efficiency, so that number moved up. So whatever we are getting in, we are getting them out plus, and then some,
So this, this backlog that now exists with source testing.
Right.
That's going to affect your progress on that. And I think at the last, what was it, the last board meetings, I don't know who, whether it was you.
I wasn't
Wayne,
there.
or
I wasn't
Phil, or- Anyway, I heard the number 800. One of the board members asked, what is the backlog? And I heard the figure 800, and then the other question was, how many do you process a year? And I heard the figure 700. But what is the backlog? Is it 800?
You mean under the source test review? I think it's around there, and because it's a different team that is processing those, I don't want to speak for them, but there'll be a separate process. We are going to form a working group, just like we formed this Permit Streamlining working group, to work with our stakeholders on that specific backlog, on the source test report review related backlog. But it's around in that neighborhood. I heard those numbers as well.
Yeah. So what I'm hoping is we're not going to see all your good work, get impeded here by whatever the reason is for the source test backlog.
It's one of our Achilles heels, okay? I mean, I gotta tell you, because we cannot issue the permit to operate, until and unless that source test report gets reviewed, gets approved, and the green light is given. So we are, despite that, we are making progress in reducing our permit backlog. Even with that handicap, if we'll manage to resolve the source test review handicap, actually things will start moving even faster. But we have to be very careful. You're absolutely right, because if that thing grows, it's going to impede our success.
Doesn't that raise another question about the efficiency, having two parts, two different groups?
Yeah.
Both are responsible for getting one permit out, but having the responsibility in
There's
two
a lack of
separate.
communication
Yeah.
there for sure.
We, on the engineering side, we communicate pretty well, actually, with the source testing. And we collaborate with different offices. For instance, if there is CEQA is one of the milestones, one of the tasks there, we work with planning rules in reviewing CEQA, and we are dependent on them reviewing the CEQA documents. If there is an HRA, or 802588, or some type of toxic risk analysis assessment that needs to be done, it's typically done by planning and rules. We are dependent on that. If there is a lab test analysis or source test analysis, we are dependent on the source test team or on the lab. That's unfortunately how it is, but it behooves us to work smarter, more efficiently, all the different divisions, so that we can move things even faster.
Do you still have this procedure in place now that you've got the backlog where you can have your permit expedited for a fee?
It's still there in the rule. It's available. It's optional.
But does that affect if there is a source test involved?
Yes, it does. I mean,
So that
when
fee
I say
includes the source test too? I can get my source test?
okay, no,
Those are different.
it's a different one. The fee that you were talking about is only for the permit evaluation, permit processing.
Right.
If you have a source test that you want to submit to our sources team and you want to expedite the review, there is a separate
Another fee,
expedite.
another
Yeah,
fee?
that's a separate, yeah.
But the diary will go a long ways to helping this issue of what's the holdup?
Yeah,
What are
exactly.
we waiting for?
Exactly.
If we're waiting for a source test review, at least it'll be documented and visible
Yes.
to both to the parties outside as well as inside, so
Yes.
that we can help try to push it along.
Yeah,
Because sometimes it just needs an email of, hey, has this been communicated?
Right.
Or where are we at?
Right.
So
So the
That
diary
can
identifies bottlenecks.
it
will
does, I mean,
help.
yeah, you missed that
That
part
would
of
be
the
good,
presentation. That's okay. So basically, what the diary does, it enhances transparency, right? Accountability, because it spells out, we spell out our guides, basically, where the permit is, where it's stuck. And it gives us an extra impetus, to work harder, smarter, more efficiently to move things along. So we are working very closely with, coming back to your item with source testing. They do have a staffing problem right now. There's pretty high vacancy rate, I think it's 40% plus. So that can be addressed. So we are going to be in the process of hiring a few more engineers within this month and next month. So hopefully moving forward, at least that variable, is going to be addressed, And with this, we are very optimistic things will start moving out a little bit smoother.
and that's again, I think, related to all the retirements.
It is,
It's
yes,
somewhat of a,
Yes. And it's a small group.
yeah.
Sometimes it's hard to predict. Sometimes you can, who may be retiring, you can plan for it, But sometimes it's totally unexpected. Like in our case, we are watching our vacancy rates like hawks. Even we got hit this last March, April. We have some anticipated retirements, and yet we had some completely unanticipated.
Yeah.
And our vacancy rate jumped from 10%, 12%, all the way to 24+%.
Right, and
Everybody want to leave.
those are very hard shoes to fill, because those are very experienced people that
Yes.
have a wealth of knowledge, and so trying to get,
Yeah.
that replaced is really,
Yeah.
you guys have done a wonderful,
Right.
good job getting the backlog taken care of, but
Right.
this
Right.
is gonna be the continuing challenge.
But the good news is you guys put the spotlight on that issue, especially with the fee rule and stuff, with the comments that you made. So there's enhanced awareness on our board side and on our executive officer side to make sure that we put our energy and focus on that issue, and it will be tackled. There's a commitment to form a working group, and develop an action plan like the one that we developed during the, while we were tackling the permit backlog, to do something similar with the source test issue, you know. And from my vantage point, what we accomplished was the truly difficult one. The source testing thing can be tackled.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
So, with that, back to you, Dave.
Okay.
So what we show the group so far, Bill, was a few still shots, you know, on summarize the features of this new tool. And Dave was getting ready to actually go live with some actual facilities. And what you will be seeing once you start getting in from outside and what you're going to be seeing. The system is not on the public domain yet, but I was telling the group, we are very close, you know, I mean, we are weeks away, you know, so we are going to be soliciting some feedback from you guys. And frankly, we are ready to unveil it, you know, and obviously we're very excited about it.
Okay, so I'm gonna load the first one. It's just a link to our find tool, but this is in our stage environment, which is a testing environment. It's not externally viewable outside of our firewall.
Will this be on the find page?
Yes, what I did is I linked from find in stage to this particular facility. So behind this, I can relaunch
I mean,
it.
when it goes live, we would go to the find page.
You would go to
Yes.
find, you can find a facility in find,
Yeah.
and then, like, for example, this one, you know, I put the facility ID in here through the link, and then it launches, as we showed in the last task force meeting, how the new find works, and it shows the geographic location of the facility and related information. Where our dashboard comes in is through the equipment list. So when you go through the equipment list, you'll see all active or all permits as well as pending permits or pending applications. The permits are still viewable here. When you go through the dashboard, it won't have any relevant status indicators because it's been issued. So the clock has no meaning and there's no pending action. So I'm gonna skip over those and then go to an application that was still pending as of this morning. So let's say issued it, it will still have relevant data.
And the system, once we are in production mode, will be a lot faster right now.
Oops.
But anyhow, what happened?
Oh, I accidentally clicked off.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So this is an actual facility, right?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. And so you can see it, you know, this is scrolling. So the first part of the upper part of the page shows the details. This is actually the same facility that I screenshotted for Bill's purposes. There are two indicators. There's a time elapsed indicator, which gives you the total time since it was deemed complete. And then at the top shows indicators when an application may be stuck. We call it stuck because it's awaiting information or an action from a facility, and that would be the waiting facility action, or it's awaiting something outside the engineer's control, but we're still within an agency purview, either South Coast AQMD, or maybe EPA, or maybe CEC. And then that outcome will be highlighted. That is if there's a pending action in that area. If there's no pending actions, then the in-process icon would be activated, it would be colored. Otherwise, it's grayed out. So we have the general information as I saw in the screenshot before, describing the facility, type of equipment, engineering contact. In this case, a PC was issued, so it gives you the PC issue date, and it shows you the clock. And in this case, you can see that it's in the red area because it's exceeded our typical timeframes for awaiting a PO, to Ann's point. And it shows the number of days elapsed, and it's beyond because it's awaiting facility action. So when you scroll down to see the more details, then here we have those milestones, and again, you can see that it's gone all the way to permit to construct. So permit to operate is still pending. But here in the diary, the most recent one is, conduct source testing. So, and there's been a target date assigned by the engineer or indicated by the engineer. The beginning of next year is when we expect that to be conducted, and he'll be monitoring this activity, knowing that it's awaiting that. He can continue to work on other applications because this is on hold more or less until he gets the source that's conducted. We were talking about there's additional details within the diary, so you can see all the information here, and I'll go through some of them. So it shows that the permit to construct was issued. There was a recommendation by the engineer to approve the PC, so that's something, but we don't track that in these milestones because they're not as significant milestones. They're kind of, task-oriented milestones. There's an initial determination through the fees to indicate that, yes, this should be a PC that should be issued. And there's information associated when it was assigned and when it was deemed complete, also when it was received. These that don't have descriptions, we're working on adding those in. Those are additional system-driven status. And in this case, I believe these are like batch processing system status. We're going to come up with a descriptor that kind of describes it without confusing people who are looking up from the outside. And you can see with this next one, in this case, this is all of them, there's 9. But you can have, a near infinite number of entries if it's been a long process, and it will just add additional pages here to scroll from. It allows you to sort by the various column headers as well. So in this case, it's a reverse order showing the most recent top, and then the older ones at the bottom. Here's one example.
If I could ask a question, is that a database that can be then queried? Because I having been down this road before, it seems to me the next thing people are going to ask, for example, the permit engineers are going to ask, how do I know which ones I need to work on this month? Or, I put in that due date of January, what's going to remind me in January that I need to look for this? Or,
We have internal reports that are not going to be part of the outward-facing model,
that's
but
fine,
internally, they'll have
help
access
people.
to various different ways to filter and screen.
Right.
And there, we're still developing a lot of those because we're getting, this is initially rolled out.
Right.
They're updated, they performed the initial update, and they're going through the process of doing routine updates by reviewing
Right.
their applications that have been assigned to them, and we're getting feedback on the best way for them to be able to do that.
Right, because it's quite a bit of effort to do that.
Sure.
So you want to leverage off of that effort that's been made.
Exactly. And actually, it's that feature of this tool that people like me get very excited about, because not only will the engineer will have access to the permit applications that have been assigned to that person, to that individual, but their superiors, whether it's a senior supervisor or even manager, they'll be able to see how the workload is being distributed, what are some of those applications on the red zone, let's prioritize those, So it will allow us to manage our workload a lot faster, a lot smarter, more efficiently, and redistribute workload, if necessary. If one engineer is up to his neck versus the other individual, who has very little on his or her hopper, so he can shift things around. So it will force us, will help us, work a lot smarter.
It should. Now, go back down to the diary, that left-hand column, which defines the status. Is that a pick list, or is there a standardized list that they'll be pulling from so that the queries make sense?
I would say both. If it's a system-driven status, that's automatically assigned, and we have a lookup table there.
Yeah.
If it's a intermediate status, like the ones that I displayed on the slide presentation, like the
That's
conduct
okay,
processing,
I remember, yeah.
when they assign it, they get a pick list to choose from.
They do.
And
Yeah.
they assign
because-
that and put in a target date.
Okay, great,
And-
because that'll make it meaningful.
Exactly.
Yeah. If
And-
it's text entry, it'll.
Yes,
No,
no, it's
Yeah,
not.
we're looking for uniformity because we're looking to identify trends.
Yeah.
Frankly, we spent a lot of time actually developing those lists because we want to be meaningful and practicable. You can end up with very long lists, that they are extremely resource intensive, and they become, the point comes, they become, very useless. They can be very short. That doesn't give you the granularity and flexibility. So we try to strike the right balance, but I'm sure even as we deploy this, once you start using it, you guys will start formulating some
Right.
meaningful feedback for us. And it is an area that we could improve, we could modify, as we gain a little more experience. And we'll be actively seeking your feedback, actually. But I think as a starting point, what we have in those lists, it's a pretty good list.
I mean, to further clarify, I think what you're asking, it says conduct source testing, but behind that, there's like a 6 or 8 digit code that's, it's
Okay.
shorthand, and that's where all the information is stored. This is just a description that's linked to it, and we can change that in the
Right.
future, but the code will stay the same. So if we
Right.
want to find trends, like how many applications that we identify as being held up because of source testing, we can sort those in the future as that data comes in, and maybe find out like how long has it been on in that condition, and maybe for a certain equipment type, and whether or not they're associated with particular policies or anything like that, or other state or federal regulations. And then as we come up with interpretations or guidelines associated with that, then we can go back in and update all of those at once.
That's great. That's gonna be really nice.
Yeah.
So I had a question. One of the issues we have from time to time, and actually it just occurred this week, we had an inspection and the inspector showed up with a new permit that we hadn't even seen yet, hadn't been issued yet by the district. But I guess within the system, she had it, so it was on our list. And I was just wondering if the dashboard, if that's gonna resolve that particular
So
item, because I think it was approved
No, no.
within the system, but it hadn't been
Mailed
issued
yet?
to us yet,
Mailed.
and so we haven't seen it yet.
Okay.
And I mean,
Yeah,
it's just a
several
minor,
day delays between, I mean, if it's actually, she has a copy of it, it was mailed out.
she just had, what she had was what we typically get when we're asked to review it.
A
Just
draft
the,
A draft version?
it
Or,
wasn't draft, but it was just a printout, wasn't an actual hard copy type.
but we gotta find out what that was.
But, yeah, this was just last Tuesday, so she actually, because she was asking about our new permit, and I'm like, no, I don't have a new permit.
Yeah.
Okay, that's interesting.
So, but he's raising an interesting question. So when we sent the permit out, I'll call the draft permit for their review, are we capturing it here, or?
And was it posted on the find? Did you go to the find and did you find it there?
No, I just immediately called the permit engineer and said, and he told me, oh, well, it hasn't, because it hasn't been mailed out yet. But she actually had the new permit number and the conditions.
Technically,
That's a really good point.
yeah.
No,
they
we
should
don't have it
that permit.
marked in as an intermediate status that we send a copy of the permit to the facility, awaiting facility's response. Well, maybe we'll just add it to the,
You know,
to
it's
the
not
intermediate action.
it's not a bad idea to have the date of the mailing, because then at least the
Yeah.
facility knows when was it mailed,
Yeah.
and if there's a delay,
It's
it-
right
it's-
there?
It's there.
Excellent.
is it
Okay.
there
When
yet?
when the permit's
That's
mailed,
good
there'll
because,
be a record in the diary that shows permit mailed.
that's good, because sometimes there is a delay, and then, of course, the 30-day clock starts when you receive the permit,
Right, uh-huh.
and then we go from
Yeah,
there, so that's good.
it's just, but yeah, from time to time, over time, we've had that. And I just showed the inspector, oh, here's the email. I mean, we just gave our final comments a few days ago.
Okay,
And so,
you know, that's
but,
that's news to us.
So what was the bottom line? Now, did you get in trouble or not?
no, that's why I said it's just a minor issue, but I was just surprised that she already had it, had
We too.
information on it.
Yeah.
We too.
And however they generate their reports, so.
Yeah, us too, right. Okay.
I'm going to show another example. Okay, so this particular one is a proposed new piece of equipment, and it's not shown on the map because in this particular case the address is not a verified U.S. postal address, but it's affiliated with a facility that has, that property that covers that range of addresses. And it's a new construction, so I think that will not be uncommon for new construction. And so the application hearing question is for a spray booth. And in this particular case, it's another awaiting facility action. You can see that it's in pre-screening because it's blue. It's indicated as over the 30-day clock. And you scroll down to the diary to look at a little more details. Indicates that there was an additional information request that was submitted to the applicant and waiting for response, and with the target date of beginning of next month. So when that happens, then the application is then placed on hold condition, but we continue tracking the time from the time that it was received, and to be as transparent as possible for the applicant to know that, yeah, I did submit it 7 days ago, or 37 days ago at 30 days, but it's still a pre-screening because it's a pending action. And in this case, you can see, since it's a kind of a fresh application, even with those, there's still quite a bit of information that's contained in the diary. But we track only primary milestones, in this case, received, assigned, and now it's on hold. But you see that it could change hands within units, change the unit person's assigned. Those are internal things that occur, but we're showing everything in the diary to be as transparent as possible. Okay, I'll go to the last example. Okay, this is the happiest place on earth, I've been told, Disneyland. And they.
Diamond Bar.
I picked this one because.
We have the second one. Yeah, happiest place.
It's Fantasyland too, I think.
Who, Diamond Bar?
Yeah.
Very good, man.
Disneyland has a lot of applications, that's why I kind of chose this one, but they have a lot of permit units. I'm going to go to the second page because it's an example that I wanted to highlight.
There's lots of permits.
Yeah. And in this case, it's waiting the district action here, and you see the clock is going. It's still on the green, but it's getting kind of a little deeper in there.
What kind of equipment is this?
This is a boiler.
A boiler, okay.
So.
A medium-sized boiler.
It's a Title V facility.
Yes. So,
And it's a Title V facility, yeah.
So I think someone asked a question for Title V. We put a little indicator there to kind of highlight, emphasize that it's Title V. And oftentimes the Title V applications will come in as a group. So we identify kind of the lead or the main application number that contains most of the information associated with that Title V application. And in this case, it's awaiting a district review of the source test results. So the source test was conducted and it's sent to our source testing team to do the review, and is an indicator of a target date when we expect to have that turned around. But again, you have all the other information associated with the application that comes in. The permit to construct was issued, so it serves as a temporary permit to operate. Source test was conducted, and now it's just awaiting source test results to be reviewed. We highlight that as awaiting district action.
Response to your question earlier, Tagan.
So if the source test results reports are submitted to a source testing group, if the group notify the permitting staff, hey, we received the permit, and you have to update that.
Yeah. Normally what you do is you're sending those results or those reports to your engineer, and our engineer will send that report for review to source testing.
And what about the protocol? When we submit protocols to the source test group, do we then send it also to the permit engineer to get them to indicate it's been submitted to a source test group?
Yeah.
That would be good.
Yeah, in this case, this permit was issued back on 11/13/2018, and at some point or another, the engineer has requested the source test to be done, but that was not indicated in this result because the application wasn't there yet. So they didn't put all the data yet. Now, we just recently released it, and so they started putting the latest status, what is it waiting for?
Sure.
So that's why the other intermediate
Right.
statuses are not there.
In the past, though, when Disneyland,
Uh-huh.
when we submit a protocol to the source test group, we submit it to the source test group. We don't necessarily let the
Got it.
permit engineer know. So this would be a little bit of a change, which would be good
Yeah.
to keep them both in the loop. That would help your comment
Right.
as well,
Uh-huh.
to
Yeah.
close that communication loop and then get it in here. Because
Yes, correct.
source testing is not looking at this dashboard, are they? No, they're not entering things in the diary and whatnot, right?
It's gonna be
This
the
is the
engineer.
permit engineer.
Yeah.
So the permit engineer is gonna function as the
Yes.
quarterback
Yes.
in all
Yes.
cases. And
I
so
like
that
that
would
nice.
help that
Uh-huh.
communication
Yeah,
and that
yeah,
piece.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
So that would be good.
Just as an FYI, we are trying to develop a tool for all the source tests, the ones associated with the initial permit issuance, as well as the compliance-related periodic source tests that have to be conducted every 2, 3, 5 years, whatever it is. And we are trying to centralize the way we accept and distribute, the review and the workload
Right.
within the agency. So we're probably going to be communicating to you once we are ready, a few months down the road, how that process is going to look like. In the interim, up until that happens, it would be good to keep the engineer in the loop.
Right.
Because
So that
we can
means
update
in
those.
your interim, awaiting South Coast Actions needs a protocol, a source test protocol review.
Yes,
Not just the source test results review, but also the protocol review if you want to track that.
Okay.
Sorry, just
Additional item
Yeah.
you wanna add?
yeah, that's a good
right,
point.
because
Yeah.
it's sort of, you're trying to catch all the
Yes,
wickets.
yes, yes, yes,
Mainly, you're looking for the, here, now
That's-
we're gonna go
You
to
just don't wanna
croquet.
get too granular though, so it depends on how
Right.
granular you wanna capture this information,
Right.
you wanna, put
Right.
as many information as
You
possible.
But
could
that's an important
combine-
step.
Sure.
Yeah, you could
and-
combine that together, I
Uh-huh.
guess, into one. Either it's to the source test group for protocol or report review,
Yeah,
one or the
yeah.
other.
Correct.
That would combine them together if you wanted
Right.
fewer. But that's an important one and increasingly
It is.
important because the protocol is super important now that we have that it's approved and
Yeah.
that we then follow that.
Mhm.
Okay.
Very
And then
good.
that would that would lead the source test, so you do the protocol review first.
Yeah.
Then it goes to the source testing, so it's kind of going back and forth in terms of
Yes,
awaiting district action and.
and then it
facility.
goes back to the
back to
facility
the
once that's
district.
done. That's right.
Well, and it's an important date to track too, because a lot of the new rules
Yes.
now, it's,
Yes.
they're requiring
No, no, no.
tests within the,
I agree.
Protocol.
60 days. and-
I agree 100%, yeah. No, it's a very important one. Thank you. That's
Yeah,
good.
it's okay.
Well, I mean,
Down in the
just be honest
weeds.
with you,
Uh-huh.
we did thought about that.
Uh-huh.
So there is, internally, we're putting in also comments. So the comments that the engineer was going to put in was protocol versus a source test review.
Right.
But if
Right.
this is important that you guys would like to see, that's something that for us to
Well,
consider.
it's a timing
put it in.
issue and
It
becomes
is.
a compliance issue.
Yeah,
So
it
that's
is,
where
and also it's, some of our rules have an explicit requirement that you submit your test protocol beforehand, before you run your source test. So
Yeah,
might as well capture, that element, that
Yeah.
task. in
Thank
the-
you.
in
Right.
the-
and like 1469, and that's what I was saying.
Yeah.
I mean, you get your protocol approved, you're required to conduct your source test within
Yeah.
120 days.
Yeah.
And so that's a key
Yeah, okay.
key date, key driver.
Okay.
And then your SEMS applications that you put in.
Can you repeat that? What's the 120 days?
Well, for that specific rule, but I think I think more of these new rules on the toxic side are including those specific dates, timeframes.
Mhm.
That after protocol approval, you have so many days to conduct.
Oh, yeah, because I'm not aware of that,
No,
on this.
timeframe,
the
yeah,
time,
yeah.
because, for us, it's 180 days
Yeah.
to start out.
Yeah, I think those may not be permit related.
Okay.
Yeah, those are rule
They're
rule
rules,
requirements.
I see.
Yeah. Okay.
Well, no, thank you for also the sense. We,
Yeah, the SEMS applications, we always kind of, that should be included.
well, again, we were looking from.
We submit a lot of this.
Yeah, we have to take a look at it, see if the permit gets affected by the SEMS applications or not.
It does.
it gets starts overlapping.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Because you've got to have that.
You need that,
You need that, yeah.
yeah. So that will hold it up, for sure.
Uh-huh. Okay.
David, I want to mention just a technical issue, I guess that's kind of from an information management point of view. That's probably helpful to everybody. It's a feature that we've added in at the top of this page. Scroll up, please. It's the email and the name of the engineer right here. There's an email flag that you can click on, and if your browser is email enabled, it'll automatically open an email. You can send an email to the engineer directly.
That's great.
You can type whatever you want, ask questions, and get get into feedback, something
That's nice.
Is that
from
Yeah.
that.
Blue icon?
That's that, yeah, an envelope, yeah.
Oh,
Yeah.
I'll give you, you can send an email to the engineer assigned directly,
Right.
so just to help you out.
No, sorry, maybe this is, I'm gonna go backward a little bit and a dumb question. On the 226 days elapsed, in that case, that's all about PTC is issued, we're waiting for the PO. Obviously, when you have a new application going in and you're on the 180 day clock, is there a different one? I'm sorry.
Yeah, 180
There's a
days.
different one
Yeah,
that's gonna show
for-
up there.
Yeah.
So there's a pre-PC and a post-PC
Right,
little
right.
thing.
Yeah.
So
Yes,
the
okay,
clock,
got it,
the
got
PC clock has 180 days.
Yeah,
The PO clock has 365 days.
that's
Because
what
in
you said
theory, you're
earlier.
supposed to be
I'm
distracting within the
just-
year.
Sorry, I'm just catching up.
No,
Gotcha,
it's okay.
Gotcha.
It's on
Okay.
slide 7.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Yeah, okay. So there are 3 different ones.
That's in the same 365.
There we
day
go.
Period. though.
And that's gonna be the 3
180.
clocks
Just
that
change
show
the
up.
scale.
Got
Well,
it.
in
I'm
addition,
got it
after the
now.
180
Okay.
day clock expires,
Right.
then you get, and you got your PC, you got your permit to construct, you have 365 days as a company
From that.
to build, your equipment and submit your testing
Right.
and whatever you need to submit, and us issuing the permit, so.
Right.
yeah.
And then to Terry Ann's point, when they get approval of an extension, then the clock starts again? Is that what's gonna happen?
We added the clock.
Increases actually.
Oh, okay. It
Depends on how many
okay.
days you've
Yeah.
requested the extension. If it's 6 months, a year,
Right,
it'll be 720 days.
Gotcha.
Oh, okay.
And on the 180 day clock, so for Title V applications, it's still 180 days?
No, there's different clock here.
You have a different
Over
clock?
here, this kind of gives you an indicator of the different clocks. So,
Can you put it on the screen?
yes, sir.
There you go. Okay.
Oh, sorry. I'll back out to the starting
Aha.
point. So there's a legend here, and then you can pick which clock you're interested in.
It's a little bit trickier.
Title V, mine.
Now
There are so
I'm
many
feeling
different
the way
clocks,
you're
right?
steering. Okay.
So we are
Gotcha.
giving.
So here's the
yeah.
renewal clock.
Okay.
Gotcha.
And you see, as I discussed earlier, we go like 75% of the way, consider that to be in the green. And then over the deadline is red, and then in between, we consider yellow. So
Gotcha.
you can see the map. So it
Oh,
should-
that's awesome.
So do you have the 45-day EPA review?
Well,
Or is that gonna be the
yeah,
details?
we don't have a separate clock for that.
Oh, they have the details?
We can, yeah, we
Yeah,
absorb
That's where it
that.
gets stuck,
Okay,
one of these.
That's an agency action.
agency.
Agency action, yes.
Okay.
Now for that, on that EPA 45-day review, do you guys ever request expedited
Yes,
review
yes,
from EPA? It's not, on what kind of project do you ask for expedited?
Often, we'll get requests, let's say, a refinery, is in a turnaround schedule, and they've gotta get that permit, otherwise they're gonna lose their crew. So under these circumstances, we'll ask for an expedited review and.
And how
depend-
fast can they turn
We've,
Uh,
fast, they've done it very fast at times.
They've been good,
Yeah.
actually. Gotta knock on wood,
Yeah.
when we, so long as we don't abuse it,
Right, that's the
when there's a true need, they respond.
Yeah.
And then
We had
they've
a
also-
fire once where we were trying to get
Yeah.
the company back online and they did it
Yeah.
like in a week.
And they also, since we don't want to abuse it, we also ask the facilities, is there an environmental benefit for
Right,
the EPA to review it faster
right,
than later?
right,
Otherwise, everybody's going to do
right.
expedited review, sort of similar to what happened to us. And everybody's going to file the expedited application
And then it
process.
doesn't-
And then if we have, after a point, they're just going to say, you know what, no.
Yeah.
So we're just trying to attach also, there's an environmental benefit to this whole process. that we're
We're
asking
very
for.
responsive. I mean, we have no complaints.
Okay. Close this out, and just quickly, I'll just show, if I can read, an application that was issued, or a permit that's been issued, just so you can see that, what that links to in the, when we release it to find. So let's see, what permit, here's a permit to operate that was issued. And basically it's the same screen, but with respect to the indicators, those are turned off because they don't have any meaning for something that's already been issued. So just to show you that.
But the diary will remain.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, if you want to see the detail when the PC was issued, when the PO was issued, it's going to be there. There's not going to be a clock because the permit has been issued.
Right.
Done.
So right now, when you release it, of course, there is gonna be no diary for many.
No,
of the-
Well, there's diaries, but
There
there might be a gap with respect to the intermediate status.
Right.
Yeah.
Because we only just started.
But it'll
Yeah.
populate going forward,
Going forward,
which
so.
is wonderful. This
Yeah,
is
so
awesome.
we asked our
This
staff,
is
to go
really
through
great.
each and every of the remaining
Yeah, that's
permits,
awesome.
and insert
Say
the data.
something.
Yeah. And it's there.
One
I
entry.
mean, we are done, so.
Right, that's
eh,
great. That's
We are a
awesome.
little bit nervous sometimes when you try to take the archive data, and put it on the public domain, in a live database. You always
Yeah.
get questions, how good is the
Right.
data quality? And we've gone through several testing periods internally. And every time, we'll test, we'll identify issues, we'll work with our friends at IAM, So it was an iterative process. But I think we are ready, actually, to pull the trigger here. And it's the
Gosh.
first generation,
Yeah.
I mean, are there gonna be issues? Of course, but as long as we keep an open mind and
Right.
commit ourselves to even work on the second generation or third generation as
I
things,
think it's
right?
gonna be great.
So if I was to look at this page,
Mhm.
and I could see the graphic there, and I've got 260 some odd days, whatever that is. And then I refer to the diary will tell me exactly
Yes.
what that means,
Yes.
really, what's happened in that 265-day period.
Yes.
From the time you found out.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So if my boss says, where are we in this, check the diary.
You got it.
That's the last in.
That's the objective, yeah.
So, just to kind of wrap up, we've gone through the exercise of updating all our applications and providing intermediate status conditions. Initially, this indicates that we initially started with all the ones that were red, but it turned out it was not that difficult for them to do, so they've updated all their applications and indicating whenever there is something that is holding it up. So all the applications they've updated with the intermediate milestone status where it's applicable, otherwise considered to be in process. As we go through that, we discover that there is some data quality issues. I refer to as data hygiene issues, maybe inconsistencies in how certain things have been coded or referred to as. That's more of an internal process to make sure that they're all the same. They all use maybe similar timeframes for expectations of turnaround for additional information requests to the extent that we can. There's going to be some that are going to be different, but general guidance in terms of like, do we ask for 2 weeks for turnaround, 30-day turnaround on information requests, things like that. We want to make sure they're as consistent as possible and that the updates occur in the same time frame. So an engineer, they either do it as they get feedback from or information back. In some cases, maybe they double check weekly, make sure it's consistent across our office, that they all do it in the same timeframes, and we provide coverage if they're on vacation and things like that. Some things may be historical legacy data, may have typographical errors and things like that. We got to go in there and harmonize that data. And a lot of that stuff will come because it's eventually be transparent. People will call in with questions that we don't identify them also. And that's another way for us to clear the data. But we're going through the exercise ourselves to ensure that the data is as clean as possible. Our main expectation is that at some point, when we get enough data, we're going to be able to identify trends and opportunities to increase efficiencies and improve our processes, our business processes, by either coming up with new ways to do things, better interpretations, or streamline consistent approaches to certain things that we are observing as holding up the permit processing, the permit process to get us to a final approved application. As we learn more, we hope to be able to refine our categories, maybe add new maybe some milestones aren't as meaningful as we thought. Maybe we combine those. So as we go forward, those are the things going to be looking to improve. And we want to be able to take these findings and update, the task force, as well as maybe Stationary Service Committee, on our findings and the things that we've implemented to make improvements. And we want to be able to further distinguish going forward, maybe the difference between what is a permit backlog versus a working inventory. Because if you say that right now we're tracking all pending applications, and if the impression is that that's a backlog, and we want to get that to zero, basically you have no work for anybody to do, which doesn't necessarily make a lot of sense. So there's a balance between what our working inventory and what is like delinquent, and we want to be able to distinguish the difference between sustainable working inventory and things that are clearly need to be addressed through either some kind of policy change or some other mechanism to eliminate things that are really on hold.
So I want to give a shout out to Saad Karam and his team, who is working on countless hours with David Anna and his team and Amir for months, almost going to a year, to put this thing together. And you can see, the possibilities are endless over here, and the potential, it's going to be a very valuable tool for both sides, Sure. Julie,
This is really, this is really awesome. It's really exciting, and it really is a big milestone.
Yeah.
And the results on getting the backlog down has been tremendous. It's really been huge. Can I bring up a new different topic maybe a little
Sure,
bit to think, what do we do, next?
Yes,
Our
you
next
may.
focus of,
yeah.
how can we
Big
really
things.
make a big thing,
Uh-huh.
a big improvement?
Yeah.
If you would pull up, if you don't mind, the policy website, the
Yes,
policy page.
yes,
It's for transparency
Yes.
and consistency, especially because we have people retiring and we do see a lot of changes.
Yes.
We're starting to see a lot of inconsistency and in permitting as well as enforcement.
Uh-huh.
And I think a lot of that stems from we don't have clear written policies.
Okay.
We can, go ahead, yeah, there's a page, I know it keeps moving around, but there is a little, it's like a little, yep, that's it.
Yeah.
It's like a little database, and just click on that full listing.
It takes a little while.
It's our
It does.
to-do list, by the way, to redo the
There's
website.
that,
Uh-huh.
there's that,
Yeah.
but awkward or not awkward, if you pull this up,
Yes.
you'll see that, and go ahead and scroll down, these are really old.
Yes,
And many of these are not practiced anymore
right,
even.
right.
Some of them are irrelevant.
Okay.
But the most important thing to me is scroll all the way down, just grab the bar and just go all the way to the bottom. There's a complete dearth of active policies that are being implemented inconsistently, completely. For example, one permitting group will say, oh, we can't give you an extension to the source test due date.
Uh-huh.
It's not possible, go to the hearing board. Another group will say, send us an email, we'll give you an approval. Okay, really? What's the policy? There's nothing
Okay.
written. Another one is, I have students at my UCI class, they're studying for the CPP exam, and then they're asking me, what is the policy with respect to calculating the offset requirement? Do you round before the 1.2 is applied? Or do you round after the 1.2 is applied? That's a huge big deal.
Of course.
That's huge. It's huge. You're laughing. It's huge.
Yeah.
Okay, you tell me where that's written down in any of your guidance, anywhere.
Yeah.
And it's.
Got
it's
it.
n-
Yeah, I got
it-
a complete policy.
Yeah.
That's gonna
It-
take
So,
years.
Well, no, I understand that, and this has been something that I've talked about for about 10 years. But I think we gotta get to saying that if it's not written down, it's not a policy. I think management needs to realize, if it's not showing up here,
Yeah.
it's not publicly available,
Yeah.
it's not approved by upper management. Have
Yeah.
you approved these policies that are being implemented? There's been no
Right.
approval process, no public disclosure process, and then the groups are doing their own things.
Yeah.
And they're
This is fair, I mean,
You need
these
to
are
distinguish
good points.
between policy and procedure.
And procedure,
What-
yeah,
What,
yeah.
what you're doing versus
Right.
what your
Right.
saying.
That's right, so to me, if I'm talking to a permit engineer and they're telling me, oh, it's policy, I'm saying
Now, where is it? Show
baloney
me.
on
Yeah, show
that,
me.
because if it's not written and it's not here, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
And same thing on compliance side, as I have discussed with Danny, there are a lot of reclaim compliance related issues that dovetail into permitting condition requirements that should be rule interpretations. If they are policies, they need to show up here. Otherwise, they are not policies.
Yeah.
They're a wish list of the staff, period.
There's a lot of work. No, it's a point well taken. It's a very long laundry list of policies that she sees all
Well,
over
but you
there,
can
right?
see the gap. I mean,
Yeah.
there has been a 10-year gap, well, 2012, okay,
Right.
so it's 29, there's a 7-year gap
Yes,
of
Okay.
documenting anything
right,
that's a
Right.
policy. It really, if it is a policy, it needs
yes.
to show up here.
So what we started doing, it's, again, this is on our to-do list, not only revise the look and how we catalog policies.
So
and make
it
them a
doesn't
little
matter
bit,
the look.
yeah.
What matters is
user-friendly.
that it's
the
available.
content, and the availability.
Is it written? Is
Yeah.
it clear? Is it consistently
Right,
used? Is
right.
it publicly
Uh-huh.
available?
So
And
that-
has it been discussed
Two things that we are
in the
doing,
public?
and we will be doing.
Yeah.
So we started revising some of those policies.
Yeah.
And we started, for instance, we have a new revised policy for how we conduct public noticing, establishing the de minimis levels to make things move a little bit. Huh?
Yeah, they're right there.
Yeah. We started developing a new process, how we how we replace catalyst equivalent, how do we demonstrate
Equivalency.
equivalency,
That's
on the
brilliant,
catalyst,
yes.
right?
That's important, yeah.
So there are, the
Right.
new ones, basically we focus our attention on things that will help us move the ball a little bit faster,
Right.
smoother.
Right.
But we know that there's a lot of work to be done, go back, and harmonize things. So the next big thing that we are gonna be working on is, we wanna initiate the updating of our handbook. In fact, I shouldn't be calling it updating. We are gonna rewrite it from scratch, and we are
That's a
gonna.
big undertaking.
It's a huge undertaking, but we wanna tackle literally dozens and dozens of
Right.
different processes and come up with, I don't wanna say boilerplate, but suggested permit conditions and
Right,
evaluation procedures that will homogenize, harmonize, the way we do things across the units, different units, because this is one of the comments that we have been receiving consistently from our stakeholders,
right.
well, there's inconsistency.
It's
between
becoming,
the
there
units.
used to be,
Yeah.
I'm gonna call it wobble, there used to be wobble, and now it's like a huge wobble.
Yeah.
Well, Maki, have you
And-
thought about maybe giving some thought to forming like a policies and procedures team? In other words, you grab one of those and say, is this still our policy?
Yeah.
And talk to the affected managers,
We do.
are we doing this now? And if
Right.
not,
And
what
So-
are we doing?
allow stakeholders to
Yeah.
come to this
Yeah.
policy committee and go, okay, I've been told this.
Yeah.
What is the policy?
Yeah.
Because right now, it's to some mysterious
Right, so the
individual
way we are
that
doing it
is to
internally,
make a decision.
before we came up with new ones, at least on the 2018, 2019 timeframe, this is what we do internally. All our managers get involved, first of all, in my team. Once we have our first draft that we think, looks like, we'll be able to implement, we engage, the different offices, specifically our legal office, and depending on the type of policy, planning may have to be getting involved, or if it's financial related, finance will get involved. If it's source testing related, it's our source testing team, and ultimately we'll present it to our executive officer, and it's only when we get the thumbs up, we finalize that policy. And the moment we do this, we'll bring it here to this group. I mean, we thought this group is good enough, has gelled, and are experienced individuals to give us some feedback, so.
We can give you some, I'm sure all of us can give you one. If we all pick our, okay, here's one where we don't understand why we're being told this is a policy. And at least we could start looking at it, because I think that is what's needed. It's gotta be looked at by the various parties internally to make a consistent decision. Rather than each team is doing these individual things. Which don't make sense.
Obviously, we can do all things all at once, we gotta prioritize things, but I'll be relying on you guys to bring certain things up to our attention, and then we can prioritize it, depending on.
But see, if you had like I call it a systems engineering team or policies and procedures team, then you've got a group, that they're focused on a particular policy, and that policy may lap over several different of your departments. But they will keep track of that. So they go to visit permitting or engineering or finance. But they're moving this through there, not you start it and then put it in my in basket, and then it may stay there for some period of time, and then when I'm finishing, then I'll give it to Judy, and she's up to here with other things. And this way you have somebody ramrocking.
I suspect some, very very quickly, Lockie and a few others are just gonna go, no, we should do it this way, and then it's just done.
Absolutely.
And then you have a document that's representative of the agency.
Right.
Not a particular.
And then the staff know what they're supposed to do, and then we don't waste time trying to have lots of discussions about it and trying to figure it out.
No, I agree.
And then we just have clarity.
And if there are, you had mentioned one other thing, so, okay, I have not seen anything in writing, but there's this unwritten, verbal policy that your engineers keep referring to. If there are instances like that, and things need to be put in writing, let us know, and we can work on those things, so, but I'll need some assistance, I'll need some feedback from you guys. But
And actually, we have developed a new team called Administration and Automation Team, which David Ono is the manager.
Mr. Ono over here,
Standardized
the newly anointed manager of that team, so.
What is it? It's called what?
Administration and Automation.
Admin and auto.
AA.
Not to be confused with American Airlines.
When your life has become unmanageable, see there, right?
It's always seemed to me, the more consistent, the more we just go, okay, this is how we do it, what's our process, what's our procedure, whatever you want to call it, but how is it we're moving forward, and where are the bounds of what we're doing? Because it gets very difficult, it becomes impossible.
We
we're
fully
not
understand
perfect. No, we're not perfect people, we
That's
make
right.
mistakes.
That's right.
How do we
But this is
give
why,
ourselves the guide rails we need to
this is why
achieve what
we
we're trying
want
to
to
do.
start that handbook work, and we are fully cognizant that it's super resource intensive, but just imagine as we put the different chapters, let's say we are dealing with IC engines, or emergency IC engines, and there are different teams processing IC engines, right? And you may argue, oh God, we get, different permit conditions from this team versus that team. As we put together that chapter that will reflect on the agency.
We just need Roy Oliveras to sit down and just write
Yeah.
it down.
Well,
Just ask Roy.
well, each team will get involved actually in
Yeah.
developing their respective chapters reflective, of the equipment they are processing.
But then across teams, they have some consistency.
Yeah, we have to sit, that's the exercise that we are gonna go through. that are gonna be reviewed by all the teams. Everybody, will have to agree, on the permit conditions, so everything will get standardized.
Right.
Yes, a lot of work, but the
Well-
end result will be helpful for all
Well,
of us.
remember you had
The
that,
blue
remember you had
envelopes.
those standardized.
Oh, it's gonna be
conditions.
several
Remember
volumes.
that book
No, that's
that
what you
we
guys
used to
had, the
have?
blue ones.
Yeah,
Remember
oh,
that
I
book?
see,
That's
yeah.
still here.
Still
Yeah,
here.
yeah.
We're still
Yeah.
utilizing.
They're still around.
Yeah,
Yeah, so you gotta start with that little conditions book and you gotta have the little pick list.
yeah.
Lastly,
Yes.
I can't agree with Judy's comments more because, that's a consistency, for permits and agencies is hugely important. Depending on, who you go to.
Right.
You get better permits, it's really, yeah, but anyway, I think at one point, in one of these meetings, you mentioned there was a bunch of templates already available.
Yeah.
Permit templates.
Uh-huh.
And, I'm not sure if you said they were available online or,
They're not online, but the permit handbook,
yeah.
everything will be online,
Uh-huh.
including those.
Okay. You gave us a number one time, it was like over 100 templates. Is that true?
Or, I don't think so.
It was quite a few.
Even though, my wish list, when we develop this handbook, there will be 100 different chapters, reflecting 100 different processes and equipment. Everything that we process, in an ideal world, we would like to place them in this handbook. Obviously, we are not going to start with 100. We are going to start perhaps, with the 10 most, commonly utilized equipment. A quarter later, maybe we'll add another 10. A quarter later, maybe another 10. And over a period of maybe a year or two, it's going to take some time. We'll have, perhaps multiple volumes. They'll all be online, so you'll be able to refer to. So, and we'll be bringing them here, actually, once, before we finalize the chapters, we'll be bringing them to this group to solicit some of your feedback. And we envision that to be a very dynamic process, they're not going to be cast in stone, as things continue improving, we'll be able to go back and revise and update. But at least we want to start that process, that exercise, that I think will go a long way to address the issues that you guys have
Yeah,
brought
but I
up.
think we should take small steps. I mean, if you have, some of this things available now, maybe it's possible to.
It may be the
Right.
easiest, to start from, might as well.
Yeah, and because, for applicants, it's too good to see, the template could be like the minimum conditions. And
Yeah.
from there, there'll be,
Yeah.
Right.
I'll give you an idea, I'll give you a suggestion. We have a policy.
Is it written? No.
Yes, it is.
Okay.
It's very well written, dates, version, signatures, where we basically try to consolidate where we could the two-step permitting process into one, and how to address instances where we may need source tests to conduct a source
Right.
test and stuff. It has to
Sometimes
do with
we
the
don't.
boilers. And what would be some of the permit conditions, suggested permit conditions? You always have to leave some latitude because there may be special circumstances that may necessitate, different permit conditions. But at least if you read the policy, what number was it? I can't remember now. It doesn't matter.
I know
It's
it.
one of-
I know.
It's a pretty long.
It is written.
It is written. It's like more than 20 pages, but it's 20 pages because, not necessarily the policy, but because we are giving so many examples for different permutations to help the engineers
Yeah.
and also help you guys, because you can see what the engineers are
Right.
seeing
If you get
and
your
working on.
policies down to 2 tablets.
Yeah.
Good enough for the.
Good enough, yeah,
world,
yeah,
and
exactly.
Good enough for you.
Yeah.
If I could make a suggestion
Uh-huh.
then, and combining with what Tariana's saying, and that is maybe take a modular approach.
Uh-huh.
Start, and not unlike the back guidelines,
Mhm.
start with your guidelines,
Mhm.
right? And then like conditions would be sort of a library of conditions
Yeah.
by permit type
Yes.
that go with, say, the forms, for example, right? It ties together. Make it modular. You have the ability, right, to structure it
Yeah.
as sort of its own web page with modules.
Okay.
The Bay Area has a singleton
Yes.
document, and
Yes.
that may be what you're looking at of, we can have one document that's our guidelines.
Yeah.
It's too stiff.
Two step, huh? Okay.
And it would be a difficult effort to build.
Yeah.
But if you start with modules, you can build.
Yes.
And the reason I say the Bay Areas are too stiff, they, for example, spelled out emission factors to use for semiconductor operations. Well, as you can imagine, semiconductor operations come in all kinds of flavors, and so their one emission factor is wildly inadequate for a lot of things. So you don't want permit engineers and others locked into something
Right.
that's too narrow.
Got it.
So
Okay.
modules,
Okay.
think of building blocks and start those building blocks and putting them
What I,
together.
no, these are very good suggestions, and what we'll do next time we meet, we may not have a product to present yet, but perhaps the concept, the
Start with
module
building.
concept,
Yeah.
and we can solicit some, your feedback, to
Yeah.
see whether we are on the right track, and then we can use that as a model to continue
Yeah.
going the next steps, so.
Yeah.
Well, then-
Because you can
Yeah.
start with pieces that you have.
Yeah.
You really
Yeah,
have
yeah.
quite a few pieces that you can start with.
I mean, having some type of standardized is useful, but, I mean, as we've seen in recent IC engine permits, it's important to have
Yes.
the flexibility to adjust
To customize.
the conditions.
Those will be suggested, list of permit conditions, so, but, yeah, we don't want to foreclose that opportunity, because it will be very important, not, maybe 95% of the equipment, can live with those standardized permit conditions, and there'll be the 5% that fall into that
That's
special
right.
circumstance
And then
category.
the 95 can be done very quickly.
You got
They
it.
accept, it's like, the standard
That's
permit,
the
they
idea.
accept that, but
That's the
wait,
idea.
mine's different. I've
Yep.
got a unique situation, I've
Yeah.
got to do something different.
Yeah, that's the idea.
I picked up something from Judy's comment about, those equipment specific forms. Maybe there's a link to maybe a standard or suggested conditions for that specific equipment, like boilers,
Yeah.
scrubbers.
Yeah.
That might be very useful.
Yeah,
That'd be great.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Remember, we didn't talk today about it, but we have already developed, 3 automated permitting tools for the simple equipment, the dry cleaners, the service stations, the bloody spraylers. We developed standardized conditions, for all those, So we are gonna replicate the same thing in the handbook. Maybe we won't be able to develop automated permitting online tools,
No,
but at least at a minimum, we can standardize the
you
conditions.
can't. So rather than thinking of it as a handbook, it's a database
Yeah.
of the
Yes,
forms,
Yes.
the conditions that go with that
Right,
form,
right.
the guidance, think about AP 42,
right,
as old as that is,
yes,
right? How, when you go to the boiler section, you go
Yeah.
external combustion, and then it lays out, how does that work, what does it do?
yeah,
And then what are the emissions,
Uh-huh.
how do you control those emissions,
Yeah.
right? Something like that, that's a more modular,
yes,
that they can,
Right.
you've got the
Uh-huh.
start with the gas stations and the dry cleaners, right? And it just builds on
I
that.
mean, you mentioned AP 42, we want this effort to be the new AP 42 that will take us for the next 40 years, 50 years.
Thank you, because that's
So-
my other, it's
Uh-huh.
like the emission factor database is so old now,
Yeah.
we look at that and go, oh.
Yeah,
We have
There
so
is-
much more, you guys have so much more data and information available that needs to be made more available.
there is an effort.
But that's for next year.
Uh-huh. Well, there is actually a statewide effort as part of this AB 617,
Yeah.
because it's touching so many different facilities, and many of them are on the smaller side.
Right.
And there's
The
such
standardized
a
reporting
wide
is,
variability, on the emission factors from different agencies. So there is an effort, to basically establish some databases, some clearinghouses that compiles, all the different emission factors and
Right.
have specified, under what circumstances those would be applicable, in an effort, to harmonize things,
Right.
so that, when Bill needs, to submit his emission report, at least, him and his counterpart, in Barry, they're submitting under, standardized conditions using the same numbers.
Right,
And there's some comparability, some.
there's harmony.
Yeah,
But
right.
again, you guys have the lead on that with your AER system, right?
Yes.
You really do have a lot going there. It
yes.
just needs a little more, but that's
Right.
for next year. Let's do.
It is, for the next year,
These
yeah.
are policies and procedures this year.
I gotta tell you, actually, we'll be working on several fronts, so.
It's complicated.
It is complicated, but we can take the linear approach because, yeah, policies and procedures are very important. But so is standardized the permit conditions,
Yeah.
What we're doing with the permit backlog reduction and
Right.
developing, this new tool or the online tools, were very important, there were commitments to our board.
Right.
But so are these, harmonizing the
But those
permit
policies
conditions.
and procedures are the foundation for
Yeah.
the conditions.
Yeah.
They are foundational, and I think that needs a strong recognition.
Mm-hmm.
Those are foundational for permitting and for compliance.
Mhm.
And it's really important.
Okay.
I think management hasn't realized
Mhm.
that this is a complete lack right now.
Mhm. We do realize it's just
It's hard.
so voluminous,
Yeah.
but we gotta start
But you gotta
somewhere.
start somewhere.
Yeah, and
Yeah.
you guys can help us. You may say, because we can throw the darts, and big one, but if you tell us, hey, maybe this one is the one that, are the most important for the time being, and tackle these first three, and maybe we can start with those. I mean, that type of feedback.
Just as important as your employment policies are,
Employment policies.
well, hiring,
Yes.
or your work, your employment policy,
Uh-huh.
and your pay policies, your finance policies, your engineering, your scientific, and everything else are just as important.
Yes. Yes.
You wouldn't open your doors without those kinds of policies. You shouldn't continue without these.
Mhm. I agree. Agree. Anything else?
I'm so glad you have this group.
Yeah,
I really
yeah,
appreciate
yeah,
it.
yeah. No, and we
It's really
appreciate
important, the work that you're doing.
the
Really
feedback
is.
that you're providing
Thanks
us
very
with.
much.
Yeah.
So we had a really good discussion, so what's next?
What is next? So, do you guys feel that we are ready, to go public with this? Based on what you have
Yes,
seen thus far?
bravo,
Okay.
make it so.
I think, so the next thing is, because that's the question that my boss asked me, have you shown it, to your stakeholders yet? I say,
That's
it
great.
was a few months back, that we showed, just, maybe the 30,000 foot elevation. But this one is, we are showing you some active live shots of how you guys are gonna be seeing things once you are logging in. I think we wanna deploy this in the next few weeks. So, I get the green light from my boss, just go live. And the next item is the handbook and the policies, so we'll shepherd those both simultaneously.
Yeah.
And it's gonna be an iterative process. Every quarter,
Yeah.
every 6 months, we'll
Yeah,
be
the handbook
adding.
and the policies are gonna dovetail
Yeah,
very
absolutely.
quickly, because you're gonna try to write down, well, how do we do this exactly? Well,
Yeah.
what are our accepted practices?
Right. And of course, we want to maintain our gains on the backlog reduction. We are getting heavily involved, as you guys have seen, many of us, with the reclaim phase out and assisting planning rules in developing some of those lending rules, because that process and how well that process evolves will have a great impact on how we run our business in engineering and permitting. So we have vested interest to see to it that things are moving in the right direction. So we'll be investing a good chunk of our time assisting our colleagues in that area. So these are the three fronts, the handbook, the policies, and the new rules that may be coming down the pipe. And depending on how we develop those rules, they'll have some implications on, since Saad is still here, he needs to hear that. Our existing programs that we have, whether it's a facility permit program, a Title V permit program, whether it's an NSR program, they are all designed to address and service our existing regulatory framework. As we change those, to address this frequent phase out, The programs are not designed necessarily, to address those changes. So we'll have to go very quickly back and change our software, the way those programs are designed, if we can, to address and be able to implement some of those changes. And it's not evident, so it's not a straightforward thing to do. We never talked about those things, in working group settings, but they're nightmares. It keeps us awake because you may come up with the best rule possible. If you don't have the means, the mechanisms, the software, the computer infrastructure to help you implement that, you're dead in the water. So that's why we are heavily involved, just to not only to guide and make suggestions in terms of what makes sense, in terms of phraseology, but also be cognizant and be ready to address whatever computer infrastructure changes that we need to make.
Yeah.
So job security, my friend, for the next several years. Yeah.
I know.
Well, I mean, one of the, just to Ducky's point,
I know.
I mean, if you guys have been sitting with the reclaim NSR discussions,
Oh,
if we
no.
were forced into a NSR reform, no, we did not plan for that. And it's going to affect every single one of our permits.
Well, I did hear, I went on vacation, right,
Yeah.
when that happened. What was it EPA said? They said, we're unhappy with 1306? What was the fundamental
They
thing?
want us to modify 1306
Six.
and how we determine
And 1303.
emission increases, pre-modification emissions, the PT to PT comparison,
Okay, they
want us
want
to
it
change that.
their style
Yeah.
rather than South Coast style.
Right,
Right.
right.
Wasn't their issue more piecemealing? They didn't want piecemealing. I know that's a bad word.
Okay,
but-
that's
a
another
whole
issue.
another
What they want to see is the entire mosaic, because all they're seeing, pieces. They want to see how things will morph, and will fit together.
Give us the whole package.
Yeah, give us the whole picture and demonstrate to us that what you are replacing those with is going to be equivalent, to what you had before. I mean, that's their main concern, that you don't backslide in terms of environmental benefits. And unless you have the complete package, they cannot make that assessment, So anyhow, we are digressing a little bit,
Coming into the
I-
dark side.
I
digress. So,
I heard the volcano went off and then
Yeah.
we went on
Well, it's,
vacation. I was like,
yeah, there were certain things that were expected, there were certain things that we got surprised, but anyhow, it is what it is. So we'll keep plugging along.
Makes life interesting.
It makes life interesting, yeah. So if you don't have any other comments, yeah, you have one more
Yeah,
comment.
this one, I keep going back to
Yeah.
the standard permit conditions. I know, you guys will be working on the handbook and the
Sure.
policies. I mean, that process will take a long time probably. And I think we should take advantage of what we have now.
Yeah.
Like I said, to take small steps.
Yes.
So if you could have some of the standard templates that are available now, have them available to, to
Yes.
facilities.
Yeah.
And then as we, as you guys update the policies and
Yes.
handbooks, whatever, and update them.
Yeah,
So-
that's exactly how it's going to happen. I don't want to give you the wrong impression that, we are going to wait till we have 100 different processes, fully completed, and then we are going to go public. No. It's going to be an iterative step. We are going to start with small steps, 5, 10 processes, tackle those first, The moment we think they're ready for prime time, we'll put them out, even as drafts, initially. Take them through a test drive, if I can use that term, and if we are all comfortable with what we see, then we can solidify them as we continue working on the next phase and the next phase after. So, but we are not going to wait for the whole thing, for the whole 9 yards, to be completed. So we are going to go through small increments, and it's going to be an ongoing process.
Yeah.
So at least
It's a big task.
it is a big task.
Big task.
So we are going to eat the elephant in very small bites, okay?
Yeah.
And that's how we started with the backlog. When initially we started with, what was it, 7,000?
348.
Man, I tried to trick you, but you did not get tricked. It's the right number. And when we said in our action plan we are going to reduce that, we are shooting for a 50% reduction. yeah, most people, they're gonna, you're not gonna do it, I mean, it looked too big of a number. But we started, in small bites, and we kept going every quarter, we got it done, so we'll get this one done too, so.
So by next quarter, we'll see something.
Yes. Okay, if there are no other comments, I want to thank you all again for the valuable feedback that you provided us with and for joining us at our meeting. It was a very productive one. And we'll adjourn the meeting and we shall see you in the not too distant future. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks very much,
You're gonna be
Malcolm. Thanks
pushing
for
all
your
of this with under 1,000 people.
With how many?